Hello and welcome to today's episode of Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV. So whether you're listening on our podcast or watching us on this new video channel, I'm delighted to welcome you to my conversation with a brand that has been the top of our wish list to bring on the show for the last few years. McDonald's is, of course, the world's leading global food service retailer, with over 40,000 locations in over 100 countries. Just recently, McDonald's was listed in second place of the world's most innovative companies, just behind OpenAI. According to its latest annual report, McDonald's now operates loyalty programs in over 50 markets, with over 50 million members active in just the last 90 days. Joining me today to share this incredible story is Bess Cades, Director of Customer Engagement Strategy and Lifetime Value for McDonald's. And I want to thank our friends in Epsilon and the Publicis Group for giving us this introduction to Bess. Previously, Bess was Director of Global Membership for Nike, and she also spent some of her career working with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. From what I learned from Bess and the rate of growth for McDonald's around the world, it seems to me that in time, McDonald's could become one of the world's largest loyalty programs. So please do enjoy this masterclass in loyalty marketing from one of the world's greatest brands. So, Bess Cades, welcome to Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV.
Thanks, I'm so excited to be here.
You have been doing some extraordinary work, Bess, over the last number of years and no doubt throughout your whole career. So we're here to tell a very exciting story about what you've been doing in your loyalty role with McDonald's. But first and foremost, before we get into all of that, as you know, we love to talk about our guests' favorite loyalty programs. So in your kind of personal or professional life, I guess you're probably noticing and paying a huge amount of attention to all these different loyalty programs in the United States. So first question, of course, what is your personal favorite loyalty program?
Oh, thanks for asking the question. This is maybe not my favorite one, but this is the one that I've been kind of following really closely because I think it's the most interesting around me. There is a local, higher class convenience store that started in Chicago and now has about 25 stores in about 5 different cities. It's a really cool store because it has not only is it a convenience store, but it also has a wine bar, a coffee bar, and it delivers a lot. So it kind of competes with DoorDash as well. And the thing I really love about their loyalty program is it's really interesting because it has 2 tiers. There's the free tier, which is just basically their member tier, which you join by making one online order. And then once you spend $100 a month, you reach their member plus status. So at the free membership tier, the benefits are like getting a free cafe drink each month, or an early look at new products, or no corkage fee if you drink in their wine bar. But the member plus tier is where if you spend $100 a month, you get this member plus tier for that month and the next month, where you can unlock special pricing for that month and the month after. So it's $1 coffee and tea, $3 drinks, or cheaper house wines. And the reason I really love this, I realized I actually forgot to say the name of the place. It's called Foxtrot.
Okay.
The reason I really love this is a couple of things. One is I like how it really connects the online and offline experiences. So, within the store, there's, members only aisles, but then there's also, early and exclusive access onto the online products. I like loyalty programs that feel like they get better the more that you use them. So the more you use this product, you continue to get access to their special pricing and kind of that free insider status.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really like is that it's one of those programs that I feel like really hones in on the activities that it wants customers to do and drives those activities through their loyalty program. So some of the things that I would think drive higher lifetime value for their customers are things like ordering delivery or, drinking in their cafe bar or making those online orders. And so those are the things that it nudges with their benefits, which I think is a really interesting model.
You've used one of my favorite words, Bess, and I don't even, I've never heard of Foxtrot, but that word nudge, I think it's actually a very effective word in the whole world of loyalty, because it's exactly that. I think of our formal definition of like driving profitable behavior change. But actually, when I think about it, like just on a personal level, sometimes I do just need that nudge. So it might be something that kind of educates me or inspires me, or like you just said, like I just feel like I've got like the upper edge. So Foxtrot sounds amazing. So really pleased to hear that. I haven't been in Chicago in a long time. So really looking forward to, please God, getting there sometime soon and catching up with you guys. So you do have an incredible career, Bess, to get you to this role in McDonald's, which I know is constantly evolving. And there's a huge amount of wonderful change. And I've always admired McDonald's, actually. It's one of those brands that, in fact, it's everything. So whether it's the brand or its level of innovation or the attention to all the different stakeholders, there's just a lot going on there. So tell us about your career to date and how you ended up in this particular role at this particular time.
Sure. When I left grad school, I knew I wanted to go somewhere fun and complicated and exciting and sexy to me. And I was really interested in my skill set at the time was working in finance. And so I started out after grad school working in a financial in a role in a financial rotation program at United Airlines, a place that I thought that I would never really stop growing. I spent about 6 years at United and I loved United. I'm still very loyal to United. It's the only airline I fly.
Oh.
And in my second to last role there, I was doing finance for loyalty. Throughout that process, I discovered I liked loyalty better than I liked finance. And so when they moved me to a role that was more finance and farther away from the customer and less loyalty, I took the opportunity to make a leap out of the finance world and into more marketing, and took an opportunity to work on membership at Nike.
Wow.
Working at Nike was an amazing education for me. I definitely walked out of Nike with a completely different skill set than I started with. I was there for about a year and a half working on their membership program and thinking through how do they run membership a little bit more like a business. So still working on my finance skills there, but now in kind of the marketing world. Once I was there for about a year and a half, my role had kind of run its course at that point, and I was looking to move to a different role. And McDonald's kind of reached out to me and said they were building a loyalty program, and did I want to help build it? And the idea of building a loyalty program from scratch was really, really exciting. I love the idea of building things from scratch like that. So when I joined McDonald's in the role of, director of global loyalty, there were about 12 markets that already had loyalty in them. They were all relatively small markets. And the goal was to use those small markets as test cases and then think through how do we then expand throughout the world. And so in my time in that role, we basically expanded to about 50 markets, which was really, really exciting.
Wow.
And really grew a program from not having one at all, which was really fun.
Honestly, I think you have the dream role, Bess, and certainly have done extraordinary work because, as I said, McDonald's is such an incredible brand, and so many other, restaurants and retailers have had loyalty programs for so many years. And I think, when I started thinking and actually writing about McDonald's and loyalty, it was very much like wondering if the United States would ever really go all in. Would the US market, as presumably your biggest market, I know you've got plenty of big markets all over the world, but I was always wondering, would you guys ever really go for it in the US? Because I knew it was happening in different markets around the world. So why do you think McDonald's ultimately made this decision to go global? Because from, as you said, 12 markets initially, 50 markets now. I think it's 2 years old in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. You launched in mid-2021, yeah? Fantastic.
Yeah,
So tell us about the thinking internally, because one of the things I always think is super interesting about you guys is it is a franchise-owned business. So in effect, there's probably tens of thousands of decision makers about something as strategic as launching a loyalty program. So I'd love to get an understanding of how did you decide that this was absolutely the best strategy for McDonald's in all markets?
Sure. So a couple of things on that. One is I mean, I think with many loyalty programs, you have to, start with the customer, and customers were begging us for it. So that
Okay.
was starting there. It was kind of like less of a, would we, but more probably when.
Okay.
Second of all, when you think of any loyalty programs, there are probably many reasons why people do it. But for us, the thought process was there are three things. One is, in the short term, we do know that customers are, really leaning towards digital experiences. And we know that when customers use digital in our restaurants and they, order and pay for themselves, like that actually is a better experience. And we have data that they're happier and more satisfied when they do. And so we do want to nudge them onto those digital properties.
Yeah.
But in the longer term, one is that we didn't at McDonald's have the ability to connect people's transactions. So, we had no idea that the person who bought McNuggets at work one day was the same person who, bought a Happy Meal for their family the next day, or that the person who did coffee on the go one day is the same person who ordered, late night snacks the next. So we really needed the ability in order to connect those transactions in order to, really, personalize and give people more relevant experiences and use that data. And then we also wanted the ability to, surprise or delight our customers in brand right ways. And if we don't have the information, we can't really do that in those brand right ways. We don't have the permission to do so. And so that was kind of the reasoning behind why we did it. But one of the things I really love about McDonald's is kind of the owner operator construct. So in other places that I've been, a lot of the work is around like, what do you have to believe in order to make this work? But at McDonald's, you can't really rest on what do you have to believe. You actually have to have a really good business case and prove it to these like owner operators who are running their businesses.
Yeah.
And so part of the reason it actually took a while is we needed to run those, 12 market test cases and a couple others to actually prove that this was something that works and have real data and real evidence, as opposed to saying, hey, this may work in theory or it's worked for others. We actually had to prove that it would work at McDonald's.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine the business casing. It's probably the most challenging when I was building loyalty programs. Bess, I can honestly tell you, I always left the modeling to somebody else. And the fact that you had 12 markets up and running, again, it sounds like they were smaller markets, safer places. Again, I guess coming from Ireland, I always noticed that a lot of global concepts would be trialed in our country just because it was easier. So to have all of that data and prove the business model, what reaction did you get then from these owner operators when you said, look, it's working, we love it, and our customers are asking for it? Like, were they convinced? Were they excited? What kind of reaction did you get?
So this was something that people were really, really excited about. Like, it took the business case, I don't believe, was something that they were questioning once we had the real facts. I think the bigger concern is, how does this work in our restaurants? So McDonald's is, an operations business, and if it doesn't work in the restaurants, it doesn't work. So even if we have things where, the business case works, the business case makes sense, really trying to think through, how does this impact our restaurants? How does this impact our drive-through times? How does this impact our crew? Was really one of the bigger concerns, and working through what that whole go-to-market plan was in order to make it work in the restaurants was one of the biggest hurdles.
Wow. That's super interesting, because we always talk on this show about, harnessing the power of the frontline staff, which I know you guys are doing super well. But I've never really thought about the fact that actually loyalty could cause a lot of problems, a lot of delays, a lot of operational issues. And in a business that prides itself on efficiency, I can just imagine that probably even preceded the commercial concerns. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
I mean,
yeah.
We are definitely always trying to sell more hamburgers, and we are definitely always trying to, make sure that our owner operators are profitable, et cetera. But the operations concerns were extremely high.
Okay. So given that you had the 12 markets, you had the data, how easy was it to develop a value proposition for American customers? Because I know that's where you're physically based, even though the role has been global. But tell us about developing the value proposition and making something that, of course, addressed the digital experience that you talked about, because we do all love a seamless experience, of course. But in terms of like deciding, what's the earn going to look like? What's the burn going to look like? Talk us a bit through that particular journey.
Sure. So my position was within global. And so the way that we usually tried to describe it was that, in global, our job is to build the sandbox, but it's not exactly our job to play in it. And then the markets play in the sandbox, but it's not their job to build it. So thinking through the value proposition for the, customers in the United States or any other countries was really the job of the people who worked in the markets.
Okay.
And so we always thought about it as kind of, how do we think about it as freedom within a framework? And so from a global place, we gave, guidelines of, you have to have a rewards menu as opposed to being cash back, or it has to be easy and simple and transparent, or you have to have your points expire, or you have to, make it a digital first program. And we gave the guidelines of what was required for the program. But then within the program, each individual market actually had the freedom to do the things that made sense for their customers because they know their customers best. So they are the ones who actually went out and did all the research, whether it was in the United States, whether it was Germany, whether it was, Latvia, etc. Like they all went through and did their own work and customer research on what does the competition look like? What makes sense operationally for our restaurants? What are the things we can put on our menu? What are the things we can't put on our menu? What does the value exchange look like? All of that honestly was done by the individual markets because they know their customers best.
So Bess, what it sounds to me like is that McDonald's has this very clear understanding, I suppose, and I guess respect is the right word, because so many global brands, I do think, try and have like a single strategy, and they say, look, consumers are pretty much, we have the same needs. And yes, of course, the menu piece is, of course, a core piece of differentiation. But I love that term you used, freedom within a framework. And it's definitely a respect that I'm feeling where different markets are going to have different things that they want to do, both from a consumer perspective, but I guess also from the perspective of the buy-in of your own McDonald's owners, operators, and everybody there. So tell us a bit more about freedom within a framework, even outside of loyalty. Is that something that applies to how McDonald's operates anyway?
Yeah, I would say, I don't want to say that this is the way it works for, every major campaign or rollout. There are definite things that require more freedom or more framework. But for many cases, there are kind of two reasons for that. One is, we do have a global brand and global brand standards. So we do want to make sure that, for that framework piece that like things are lining up to that. But the second is that we have global tech stacks. And so our goal is to have no unicorns, and we can't be building things multiple times. And so while we do know that it is required that we have some framework around it to make sure that they're following the brand standards, as well as that they are not creating complications for our technology. That freedom piece is really important because, McDonald's prides itself on really being relevant to the customer. We say we want to be a cultural icon, and we can't do that if we aren't letting our marketers do the best things that they know for their customers. Yeah. So markets definitely have a lot of differences. There are a lot of similarities, but what resonates in one market and what the competition is like in one market is going to be very, very different than what it's like in a different market. Yeah. And so if we try to make it too similar, it would just resonate for no one, I think.
And I think customers would be also, I guess, just disappointed, because again, it's one thing to have it in the menu, but if you don't reflect that in the marketing as well, of course, it's just not going to work. And you used a word which I love actually, and I'm not very much again on the techie side of loyalty, but I can understand a unicorn being something that's literally a stand-alone, unique piece of maybe architecture or a platform that nobody else has heard of. It's seen once in a blue moon, messes everything up on a global scale. So I can understand, and actually I'm just laughing. I'm thinking of people listening to this show and kind of going, okay, yeah, no unicorns. Let's make sure to totally nail that one, yeah?
The other thing to note on that too, though, is, one of our cultural norms is to, kind of steal from other markets. And so we spent a lot of time at Global trying to think through how do we bring together the best loyalty minds around the world and have them share what's worked and what's not, so that, if something's working in one market, then it can, the other loyalty markets can take that and say, actually, maybe we can make this, maybe make a little adjustment, or even just, cut and paste it into ours.
Love it, love it. And you mentioned the convenience store earlier as well, Bess, and there's actually terminology in that industry. I did a lot of content and a lot of writing about convenience store loyalty, and we had this term which was exactly copy with pride. And it was
Mhm.
exactly what you've talked about. And I
Yeah.
remember my own kind of corporate career, which is a long time ago now as well. But the idea that there are brilliant minds in different markets that have exactly the same problems. And actually, probably
Mhm.
nobody else in that country understands their particular challenge, but somebody else in the same role, obviously in a different country, has probably the right solution. So I love that idea that you're listening very carefully. And you'll be amused as well. I was interviewing somebody just a couple of days ago down in Australia, and I believe the program there is called My Maccers, which I thought was
My
brilliant.
Macas, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So again, like coming from like so many kind of brand guidelines, but something that is instantly recognizable, that I can totally see Australian consumers going totally perfect. Whereas if you tried
Mhm.
that here, for example, in the UAE, it would absolutely not resonate. So down to the level of flexibility, and again, use your term one more time, freedom within a framework, they can obviously change and adapt exactly how the program operates. And I'd love to get any examples actually, Bess, because I think you talked through, whether it is the US, even very different to Canada, and again, I'm sure Europe, Australia. Can you give us any sense of what did appeal to consumers that maybe surprised you in terms of what they needed from a loyalty program and how it might have been customized in one country versus another?
Sure. So specifically around the reward menu is different in every country. So some of the things that are very different is, for example, the United States has a little more of a breakfast first menu because breakfast is a big deal in the United States, whereas
Yeah.
Australia, for example, has a coffee first menu because coffee is a big deal there. Some of the other markets have thought a little differently on how often they change up their reward menu. So for example, in Germany, they're very often putting in like, this month only, here are a special thing that you can have, or this season only, there's a special thing that you can have on the reward menu, where other markets feel really strongly that it's fairly static. Other markets have put on non-food items on their reward menu. So for example, I know that in Portugal, they've done some partnerships that you can exchange points for, as
Mm.
well as, Germany has done Happy Meal toys, as well as Coke glasses, which has been pretty well received. And one of my favorite ones is in the UK, you can actually donate for charity. And so you can exchange your points for a donation um, to a food charity there, which is great.
Oh, gorgeous. And that's one I think, again, people listening to this show, Bess, they would love to hear that because it's very often a case that, maybe in customer research, we hear that there is, an expectation perhaps or an interest in having a charity option. And sometimes then the practical implementation, maybe customers end up going, well, actually, no, I want the free hamburger and I'll give to charity the next time. So the fact that the UK is feeling that demand and obviously seeing it is absolutely a credit to them, and no doubt will continue to grow. What about
Yeah.
discounting,
And
Bess, as well?
oh,
Just
sorry, I was gonna say to that point also, like part of this whole steal with pride that you just mentioned. So now
yeah.
that the UK has done that, many other markets are saying, how did you do that? Does that work? How did you
Mm.
market it? And getting all that information from them. So it's something that we likely feel like can expand throughout the world because we have that as a test case, which is really neat. And they're often going to our UK friends and saying,
Yeah.
hey, what did you do? And how do we get that best advice from you on that? The other piece I'd note is we also should be aware that there are different laws in different countries around, discounting certain types of foods or tax laws around free things there. So that has also led some of the changes and challenges that we've seen in different markets as well.
Amazing. I can just imagine the global conferences you guys have, Bess, and I'm guessing it's gone through ups and downs. I know, for example, your investor presentations are generally online at the moment, and I think certainly for all of us, there's been fewer kind of conferences. But I do know, again, back in Ireland, when I did a little bit of work talking with the McDonald's team, they loved to get together and, as you said, have amazing conversations and share ideas about what was working for them. So the charity idea is amazing. And I wanted to ask about discounts because I do think, certainly, let's say more mature markets, I think in the US, there is an expectation very often that there are coupons and offers quite a lot and a lot of change. So has that been your experience?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And that's something that we're trying to manage now. Part of the strategy around loyalty initially was to say, how do we use loyalty in place of some of the margin accretive offers and move more towards, a margin accretive program. I don't think we'll ever be in a world where we move away from offers totally, because our customers really expect it, especially in the United States. Like, that is something that customers absolutely say they want, and they like the combination of it. So the question is, how do we get the balance right? I would say that different markets are very different. So, if you look in your wallet right now in the US, you're likely going to have, 6, 7, 8, 9 offers, where in, Australia, you may only have 1 or 2. In the UK, you might have, 0 or 1. So every market's a little bit different there, and every market's going to be coming from a different place and are going to have to think through what that balance looks like.
Yeah.
I know that is something, and like an overarching conversation that is currently happening in probably every market, of how do we combine all of the value levers we have in a way that makes sense and is personalized and relevant for the customer and driving the right behaviors. It's going to be a constant thing that we are trying to learn on what that looks like. And we are committed to figuring out how to get it right. But I know that the data that we have and that we're collecting is going to really help us to think through what are people using, how much do we invest in a person, and how do we make sure that we're not paying more to a customer than is the thing that will drive them to do the behavior that we want.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, that is a great point, Bess. In terms of KPIs, there are so many different ways, and I know you won't be able to give us any specifics here, but in terms of the general behaviors, would you say it's some things like frequency, basket size, advocacy? Like, there's so many different things that we love our customers to do. What would you say is core for McDonald's, let's say in any market, maybe in the US, given that it's your biggest?
Yeah, I mean, I think our KPIs are probably pretty similar to other loyalty programs or other, businesses. Is we're, looking to generate, long-term customer relationships. So we look very closely on frequency and retention and thinking through, average check size of someone who is in loyalty versus not in loyalty. We look to the percentage of customers who are using the program and 90-day actives. We are working to institute, how do we drive ideas and strategies around customer lifetime value in our business, and make sure that we're really driving and investing for the long term, as opposed to just getting guest counts in the restaurant, tomorrow. But I think that it's a journey that we're going on there too. But our focus is very much on the, frequency and retention of the long term.
Actually, I think that's more insightful than you realize. You're actually expressing it so casually and so beautiful that actually it's a long-term intention. Like, so many of us as loyalty professionals are under pressure, either from shareholders or, just internal short-term results, to really just drive short-term results. So the fact that McDonald's is taking that longer term view, I mean, clearly the fact that you're investing in a loyalty program anyway is very indicative of that. But I guess you've earned the trust of the stock markets, I guess, as well over so many years. So it does sound like there is an appreciation for the fact that building customer loyalty does take time. And if you invest in it now, that McDonald's customer will just behave in better ways, but for longer periods of time.
Yeah, and we'll look at, for example, when we run a, acquisition campaign or something like that, like, what are the behaviors that the people who came into that campaign do over the next 60, 90 days? How do they engage in our programs? How does their spend differ from possibly beforehand, if we had data on them beforehand? And so really trying to show that it's not just that one day that you're getting someone in the restaurant, but really driving those long-term behaviors that we want to drive.
Amazing. So listen, we're coming towards the end now, Bess. I really want to understand, what are you most proud of? I think there are so many things that we've touched on, whether it is the framework, the freedom, the piloting, all of these various insights that you've shared with us. You've had some extraordinary results, which I know have come through again in your investor presentations. But given that you've been working so closely on this for the past couple of years, what would you say you're most proud of?
Yeah, I would say, coming from a global role, and building that sandbox has been really, really fun and exciting. But what I'm really proud of, I mean, the numbers are great, but the numbers are great also because McDonald's is big, and and we have a lot of fans, and we had a lot of fans beforehand. So what really excites me is watching the marketers actually put things to life in the markets and watching them collaborate and communicate and bring, the entire organization along. The fact that we were able to move this huge behemoth glacial organization, I probably shouldn't say that about McDonald's, but this huge behemoth organization,
Yeah.
to actually accomplish this has been really fun. And I'm really proud of the fact that McDonald's launched something, we always talk about crawl, walk, run, and I think we launched a really good program, but people are really excited about how do we innovate it? How do we move it to the future? And so the excitement that everyone in the markets has throughout the whole organization and that whole team has really been, I think, the proudest piece of it.
Amazing, amazing. I sense the passion coming through, Bess. Definitely you don't come across as you talked about your finance background and, that kind of mindset and mentality. You're much more in this creative space of loving customers, dare I say it, and making sure that they experience the best of everything that McDonald's has to offer. So thank you for sharing all of these incredible insights. I really believe the journey's only just beginning for McDonald's in loyalty. 50 markets, as we said, already rolled out. Plenty more to come. I know you're starting to focus on lots of different areas, and I'll ask you to speak to that in a minute as well. But just any parting words of advice, Bess, because again, a lot of people listening to this show are in global brands. They probably have to do a lot of justification of the investment in loyalty. They probably have a lot of questions to ask and answer about things like technology. So what would your advice be to listeners of Let's Talk Loyalty, or if they're watching us on Loyalty TV, what would you say they should be thinking about first and foremost as maybe principles for success?
Yeah, I think for us, it was very much of how do we come together and co-create early with our cross-functional partners.
Okay.
So getting that buy-in early and having people come to the table, whether it is ops or marketing or insights or technology or product or all of those people, having them co-create with you in the room early so that everybody feels like they have skin in the game has been really monumental. The way that we did it, was we had this cross-functional squad, both in the markets and in global, of, meeting every single day and really co-creating together has been really key. Yeah. It's not really about bringing people along. It's about co-creation, and not really just sort of taking your one idea and dragging it through, but really having everybody create it together. So that has been key. The other thing is really focusing a lot of time and energy on training the frontline workers. So we put together, simulators for our crew so that they could learn, earn points, get excited about the program. If your crew is an evangelist of the program, and if it's not going to work in the restaurant, it's really just not going to work. So that focus on operations and focus on the crew has always been really helpful as well.
I love it. I love it. I always pick up on words. You can see me writing them down, Bess. So evangelist, I think, certainly for internal people. I mean, what more could we all hope for is to evangelize and mobilize a team at the scale that McDonald's is doing. And I also liked your word squad, like this idea of having like a hit team of excited, passionate marketers who are really going to go and build something that they know will bring joy to customers. And I remember seeing a statistic actually, again, just in preparation for today, McDonald's is serving 60 million customers every single day. So to create something that is meaningful for them is absolutely something that I can tell you're incredibly proud of, and want to wish you huge congratulations, further continued success. Tell us a bit about your future role. I know you're starting to focus more in a slightly different way within the McDonald's organization. So tell us about the work you're going to be doing now.
Sure. In my time at McDonald's, I was in a global loyalty role, and previously at Nike, I was also similarly in a global membership role. And one of the things that I've been really excited about doing that I felt was kind of missing from my toolkit and maybe some of these large matrix organizations was the opportunity to work in a market. And so recently I've actually moved to a role in the US market as opposed to being global, which will focus on, overall customer engagement strategy and really instituting how we think about, using our data asset to drive customer lifetime value, which is really exciting for me to be able to, be a little bit closer to our customer and be the one who's actually playing in the sandbox as opposed to building it.
I couldn't have picked better parting words, Bess. Playing in the sandbox. What I really hope is that you'll stay in touch with us and continue to share your story as you continue playing and, continuing to drive value for customers. So that's all from our side. Have you any final thoughts? Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, just thanks for inviting me. This was great.
Great. Bess Cades, Director of Customer Engagement Strategy and Lifetime Value, thank you so much from Let's Talk Loyalty and Loyalty TV.